So when I was indicted on August 19th of 2020 with the 64 charges, after we started looking through them with the attorneys, and there were several conspiracies that I was charged with, and one of those conspiracies was around WorldClaim, and WorldClaim was the public adjuster for insurance. It was just a company. And Michael White brought WorldClaim before the commission, but he did it very subtly. Just mentioned it to the commission that he had entered into a contract with WorldClaim. It was at one of those first commission meetings, and I'm assuming it was at maybe on October 23rd because the contract was signed on the 24th. The government maintained, because of what Michael White told them, that I was present during this contract negotiation and signed the contract and was part of bringing this in. I did sign the contract, but as we'll show with the document, the contract had already been signed by Michael White, and he had written my name in on the contract with the date, and it was just lying on the table at the commission meeting. Very common. As the mayor, usually there's a stack of contracts or documents at each commission meeting in regular times for the mayor to sign if they're approved by the commission at the end of the meeting. Well, at this time, Michael White was in charge of the city as the city manager, and so because we were only about a week and a half past the Category 5 Hurricane Michael, Michael had the ability to enter into contracts, and I don't remember anyone, in fact, the commission video shows it, no one asked him any questions about it. He just mentioned that he had entered into this contract, and no one asked a question about it, and neither did I. The way WorldClaim had made its way into the city, though, we'll go back to Chris Forehand, who I had mentioned before, had his hand in a lot of things that were going on at the city, and if you remember, he was the city engineer who was granted immunity by the government, and he actually said the first time he was called as a witness that he would take the Fifth Amendment. So WorldClaim was a conspiracy that Chris Forehand brought to Michael White. Chris had been talking with a lawyer. He said he was living out at Watercolor during the aftermath of the storm, and this lawyer, Dee Dee Rowan, had entered into an agreement with WorldClaim that whoever she could get in Bay County or the surrounding area after the storm to use WorldClaim as a public adjuster, that she would get a percentage of that. So apparently she and Chris Forehand talked about this, and she told Chris that if he could find various individuals or businesses who were interested in using WorldClaim, that she would cut him in and he could also get a percentage. So he brought that to Michael White, and this was something that I didn't know about, and I assumed the other commissioners didn't know about it, but Michael White made a deal with Chris Forehand. Oh, if I bring them into the city, can I get my public adjusting done free? And he said that he also asked if I could get mine and if Commissioner Russell could get his, and I'm not sure who else that he said. But Michael White did not discuss this with me at all. This was another one of his lies that he told to the government. But what's interesting is in the indictment, the FBI agent stated to the grand jury that I was given a pro bono contract with WorldClaim, that I was going to get my property adjusted for free. Well, I was not sent a pro bono contract until January of 2019 after the storm by email, and I'll get to that, how it came about later. But I was sent a pro bono contract, but I rejected it. I did not sign it, but the grand jury was not told that. On the other hand, Dan Russell did sign a pro bono contract with WorldClaim in November, right after the deal was made. The contract was signed October 24th, and I believe it was around the 1st of November. And he, according to what was in the indictment, he received $70,000 as a result of WorldClaim taking his account as his public adjuster. And then he was never charged. He was a sitting Lynn Haven commissioner who took a pro bono contract from a city vendor, and he was not charged. So not that I'm trying to say that, well, why wasn't this person charged, but I'm trying to point out, and I will keep pointing it out, that I was targeted. People who actually committed a crime were not prosecuted, were not indicted, were not arrested, and the person who didn't do it was. So the way my WorldClaim contract came about is in January, Chris Forehand actually approached my husband and wanted to know how our house was coming along after the storm. Well, we had, of course, insurance on our home, but my home was mortgage-free in Lynn Haven that I lived in. My grandparents built that home. My parents left it to me, and it had no mortgage. So it was really our choice what we wanted to fix, what we didn't want to fix, if we wanted to fix. But we did. And we had already gotten somewhere around $25,000 from our insurance company, and then things had stalled. And so my husband was complaining to Chris. I mean, he just got in conversation and said, yeah, it's not working out. So Chris recommended WorldClaim. He didn't mention anything about any kind of deal, any kind of discount. He just said that he had used WorldClaim and he had had a great experience. Well, I knew that the city was working with WorldClaim, and as a matter of fact, I had been in a meeting one time by phone with WorldClaim after the city started using them, and I was complaining because the city was insured for about $23 million. And we had only been told that at this point that the insurance company was going to come across with about 10 million, maybe 11. And WorldClaim was supposed to be trying to get us up to our full amount. I had no experience dealing with a public adjuster. In fact, I don't think I even knew what a public adjuster was. I'd never used one. I don't think most people would have known what it was unless you'd had your house destroyed and worked with insurance. So Chris mentioned this, and my husband said, well, yeah, that sounds good. And I had spoken, I knew Lauren Brubaker, who was the vice president. She, nice young woman, seemed very on top of things, and so I did know her. And so immediately, I'm assuming that Chris contacted her because she contacted us, my husband and I, by email, and said that sure, they'd like to help us with our adjustment. And that's when she sent the pro bono contract by email. So when I got that, my eyes got as big as saucers, and I told my husband, I said, I can't accept this. Let me just send this back. And there's actually Lauren Brubaker in her interview with the FBI, and they had this information. She told them that the mayor told me that she couldn't accept a pro bono contract because she could lose her job. I think that's how she phrased it. I don't think that's how I phrased it, but I told her I couldn't accept that. So then she said, well, we could give you a discounted rate. Well, my husband had been a purchasing manager for a major steel company here in town for years, and he was used to negotiating, and he really started negotiating with her, and she said, well, our normal fee is 10%, and he said, well, that's too high. He said, even a real estate agent only gets 6% on a house, so he offered her 5%, and she agreed to that. So I didn't see anything wrong with that, his negotiating a fee. So I said, we can do that. So they started working with us. She sent me a contract, and I did sign it for 5%. So later on, after this was in February when this contract was signed, and it took us until September for everything. Everybody was having trouble with their insurance companies, but they finally did get a settlement. It was somewhere, I have the exact amount written down, but it's a little over $80,000, maybe $81,000. And so she sent us that invoice in September of 2019. And of course, the investigation had already started in Lynn Haven in April because I had gone to Sheriff Tommy Ford on April the 1st. So we got our bill, which was 6%. And the same week that we got it, I think maybe the first week in September, we mailed her a check. We paid it in full as soon as we got the bill. So what they would say in the indictment or to the grand jury was that we paid them in September, that I hadn't planned on paying them at all, that we just paid them because the city was under investigation. That's what the grand jury was told. And then they were also told that we didn't pay the full 5%, that we paid them a lesser amount than that. If they had come and asked me the question, I could have told them the insurance company had allowed us $8,000 for living expenses to stay someplace else while we were repairing our house. And when a public adjuster takes a fee, if you've been given living expenses, they don't charge you a percentage on that. So it looked like that we had paid a little less than 5%, but we hadn't. If any of the sheriff's investigators had bothered to come and ask me about that, I could have explained it, but they had absolutely no curiosity. And so when I look back with Commissioner Dan Russell signing the pro bono contract, and I think of the other things that were happening at that time, it's interesting how interwoven he also seemed to be and how knowledgeable he seemed to be about what was going on. So when I look back to September of 2019, about the time that I'm, just paid this to WorldClaim, Commissioner Russell did a public records request on me, the mayor, and he's a sitting commissioner on the same board with me. And he asked 3 different questions. He wanted to know why I was riding around town on a city-owned golf cart, which I'd been doing since the storm. It had become sort of legendary. Even WJHG-TV did a story about me with the golf cart and the rescue dog and delivering blankets and supplies, and people would see the mayor with the golf cart, and I was out and about, and it had just become sort of part of what I had done after the storm. I also used the golf cart when the roads were so bad that if you took your car any place, you'd come back with a flat tire. And we had so many visitors in Lynn Haven at that time. We had all the different news channels, the Weather Channel, the New York Times came, the Wall Street Journal, Bill Nelson, Senator Bill Nelson, Ashley Moody, different government officials were coming, and Kevin McCarthy came, and so all these people were riding on this golf cart, and people had seen this, and it had just become sort of an iconic little thing, and I loved being on it because people could see me, I could wave at them, I could pull up in their yard. But anyway, apparently Dan Russell didn't like it. It bothered him, and so he questioned my using the golf cart. The other thing that he did is he was questioning, he said that he had received complaints from citizens, and so he wanted to know if it was true that I had billed the city for my private property being cleaned up. And of course, we had talked about that earlier in the interview. And he wanted to see those invoices, and he wanted me to give my side of the story, that he thought that I needed to give an explanation. And then the third thing he asked about was just so bizarre. I had bought baseball caps that said "I love Mayor Margo," and they were hand decorated with embroidery. And I bought quite a number of them and given them out to people as advertising, because after I had been voted mayor without an opponent, I had a choice of giving all of the campaign donations I'd received back to charity. So I gave $10,000 of it back to the Hurricane Relief Fund, which was a 501c3 that was there in the city. So it went right back to citizens. And then I bought some thank you advertising at the radio station. I gave to another charity, and then I bought those hats and just gave them out to residents, thanking them for their support. So no, the city didn't pay for the ball caps. I did. But just the fact that he would bring this up, I just felt like, I had lost a lot of capital. A lot of people were talking about the investigation. They were trying to make me look shady, and he jumped right in. So then the next month in October, when we had our 1-year celebration of the commemoration of Hurricane Michael, he actually came up to me and he acted a little sheepish, and he offered an apology. And the apology seemed sincere. It really did. And when someone says I'm sorry for something I've done, I've always been taught, accept an apology. If somebody apologizes, that's really all they can do. So I said, sure, I'll accept your apology. I'm not sure why all that occurred, and I don't understand it, but of course I'll accept your apology. And I thought that was sort of it. And then the final thing that really I thought was so strange for Commissioner Russell to do is the next month the FBI came in the dark of night and questioned me. I'd not been questioned by anybody ever since I went in and was the whistleblower for this whole thing, April the 1st of 2019. The FBI showed up and questioned me, and then, of course, the next morning, Michael White, Mickey White, Josh Anderson, Shannon Rodriguez, and David Horton were all indicted. But I was named in that indictment for having my property cleaned. And Dan Russell was also named. And Dan Russell, when we all met at City Hall that morning early after we'd heard of the arrest, we were called to come up to City Hall. And when I walked in, and we're in the temporary buildings at this time, Dan Russell said, "Oh, Mayor, I'm so relieved to see you." He said, "I was really worried about you. I was really worried. It's good to see you. I'm glad you're here." And I was like, "What? What?" And it just was so odd. And the final, all I could think of, I had been questioned and raked over the coals about property cleanup by the news media. Even before this was mentioned in the indictment, these fake invoices were circulating. Well, Dan Russell lived in a private gated community, and his community, according to Bobby Baker, the public works director of Lynn Haven, was not supposed to be cleaned or charged to the city and reimbursed by FEMA because it was a private gated community. Bobby testified and gave testimony that numerous dump trucks, loads of debris, were brought out and cleaned out of Dan Russell's neighborhood and stacked on the road for the city to haul away, and then it was ultimately reimbursed by FEMA. But again, he was not charged. He was named in the indictment, but not charged. And so I'll just leave it at that. But I think it's really strange. That's one more individual. There's Chris Forehand, who brought it to Lynn Haven, had his hand in that, and then Dan Russell, who was named just like I was, signed a pro bono contract. That document exists, but was never charged.